And we're back in the room once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the Caiman Show. Who have I got a treat for you today? Yes, I have. Yes, I have. This lady, she is no stranger to controversy, ladies and gentlemen. And this one is for all her little kittens out there. Give it up on the Caiman Show, everybody. The CEO of Big Cat Rescue. Give it up. I got 3 words for you. Carole effing Baskin. Welcome to the Caiman Show. Good to see you. How are you?
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens.
Fantastic. How's things over there? How are you doing? You okay?
Doing great. Just got a bobcat call this morning. So my daughter went racing across the state to rescue a bobcat. We get those calls pretty typically here in Florida. And those are cats that we can actually release back to the wild once they've been fixed up. So those are some of our favorite rescues to do.
Excellent. Good stuff. Sounds awesome. How's things been for you over there during the lockdown period? Has much changed for yourself during that time?
Yeah, it's been really awful financially, like it has been for everybody.
Yeah.
We closed our sanctuary on March the 15th due to COVID because the cats can actually catch COVID and die from it. And so we couldn't be exposing them to the public. And that's about $1 million a year of our revenue. And then Tiger King came out 5 days later and just, turned our whole world upside down with people hating on us. And
Yeah.
we were really worried that donations would drop and we wouldn't be able to take care of the cats, but that turned out not to be the case.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. So Tiger King, obviously we're going to talk a little about that. No brainer there. So did that have a positive effect then on donations and things after?
It wasn't a positive effect, but it didn't hurt anything. And that was what we were concerned about. We knew that the people who were already donors knew that things said about us and Tiger King weren't true, but we didn't know whether or not we'd ever be able to pick up new donors. And, people pass away or they get different interests. And so they donate to different things. And so we were really concerned that that number would drop last year, and it didn't. It stayed right about level. It's down a little bit this year, but we're also just now sending out our annual appeal letter. So that may make a difference as to when those donations come in.
Yeah, excellent. I suppose a lot of people have had to tighten things up a bit as well due to COVID, losses of jobs, change in life circumstances, things like that. So hopefully, with things on the up and normality seemingly peeping its little head out again, we'll get things back to normal and get rolling again.
Did it affect you?
Yeah, this is the reason I'm here doing podcasts as well. I was locked up in 4 walls, just watching television. I got sick of it at the end, sick of not talking to anybody. I thought, I need to speak to people. Let's run a podcast. So this is one of the positive things to come out of lockdown for me, running the Caiman Show, which is going from strength to strength. But yeah, being cooped up, working from home, things like that, it's not good for the old noggin.
And do you have a particular affinity for Caiman? Because alligators just scare me to death.
Yeah. Well, I was a pro wrestler. I am actually making a comeback for Pro Wrestling Carnage in August, on August the 28th, on their first show, the first mutation. So I'm making a wrestling comeback. Caiman was my wrestling name. I was always into reptiles, crocodilians in particular. My real name is Carl with a K. I was always called Caiman growing up. Yo, Caiman, come here. Caiman, how's it going, fella? And I just kind of stuck with that name, but changed it into like a crocodilian, if you're with me as well. So it was a great gimmick for the wrestling as well.
Wow. That's going to be a hard thing for people to get back into, because I think one of the things about COVID is it's made us all want to keep our distance from people. And in wrestling, you got to be like all over each other.
Yeah.
I don't want to touch you.
Literally, that's it. It's not going to work. I think everyone's got to get tested and everything first to make sure everyone's, running with a clean sheet. And then away we go. It'll be interesting to see how things are in terms of, social distancing and things, though, because they don't want the crowds chanting. They don't want you rearing up the crowds and everything, which is what you're taught to do when you're trained to become a wrestler. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Watch this space. So, a question, if I may, first of all, then. Lockdown, obviously, we've talked about, yeah, so things are starting to get back to normal. But what I'd like to know first, and I'm sure a lot of people out there would, is how, where, when, and why did you get into this wonderful world of big cats?
I never intended to do this. My intention from the time that I was a child was to rescue domestic cats and kittens from being killed in shelters due to overpopulation. And I felt like there needed to be a lot of money put into spaying and neutering. And that's why I left home at the age of 15. I often worked 3 jobs at a time. I built a multi-million-dollar real estate business because I knew to do that work, it was going to take a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely.
And I had a level of success by the time I was about 31 or 32 in 1991 or 1992. And I guess I was 33. But because I was born in 61, I always have trouble adding that extra. Shouldn't do math in my head. But at any rate, I ended up at an auction, and I had done bobcat rehab and release from the time that I was 17 years old. But at this auction, I was buying llamas because I would turn them loose on big tracts of land, and they clear about eye level. And people have referred to it as my llama lawn care business, which I think is kind of fun. But this guy came in with a bobcat on a leash, and his wife didn't want it as a pet anymore. And the guy next to me started bidding on the cat. And I said, when that cat grows up, she's going to tear your face off. And he said, I'm a taxidermist. I'm just going to club her in the head in the parking lot and make a den decoration.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, that was my reaction, except I was crying. And so my husband started bidding, and we probably paid more for that bobcat than anybody's ever paid for a bobcat. She did not get killed in the parking lot. And then that led us to trying to find a friend for her, because she was just a wretched pet, as you might expect. And she had been declawed, so she couldn't be released. Plus, she was out of state, which makes it illegal to release her. And she was born in captivity, which makes it illegal to release them anyway.
Lots of red tape there.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I learned from Tiger King is so many people hated me because I don't turn these tigers loose. It's like, where do you think I could turn these tigers that we rescued?
That's it. Just open the cage, send them up the track, and hope for the best. It doesn't really work like that, I'm sure.
I'm coming to your house.
Yeah.
It's there. That's not legal. And you can't send them to India because they were born in America. They're not native. And so there's just all of those reasons why you can't do that. But at any rate, we ended up at a fur farm, and we rescued 56 bobcats and Canada lynx and Siberian lynx. And then the next year, 28 more, and the next year, 22 more. And then people started calling and saying, would you take my tiger? Would you take my lamb? I'm like, what the heck are you doing with lions and tigers?
Yeah, that's the first question I was going to ask. Yeah.
So, every time something like that happens, I just think, well, I can fix this, because that's the American way. We can fix anything, right? My mother always said, you could throw enough money at things, you can fix anything. she was wrong.
All good in theory, right?
But we're getting really close to fixing it. I think this year we will pass the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and that will make it illegal for people to pay to have pictures made with the cubs, which is what drives all of the abuse.
Yeah, excellent stuff. Well, good stuff. Good on you for the work that you're doing and the work you've put in so far. And glasses off to you. I don't have a hat, but off with the glasses. So yeah, that's an interesting path into the big cat world then. So it just grew from bobcats, and then tigers and other felines started popping up left, right, and center. Do you remember the first big cat that you had? And what did you have to do? Obviously, it's not just a case of here's a big cat. Okay, fantastic. Make it up as you go along. What was the process?
Well, actually, it was pretty much making
Was it? Yeah.
Because when I came home with 56 bobcats and lynx, the first thing I did was I called the zoo, and I'm like, all right, well, how big of a cage do they need? And how, what kind of cage wire do we need to make sure that it's strong enough? And what do they eat? And how often do they eat? How much do they eat? And are there vitamins? And what kind of vaccines? And all of that kind of stuff. And they just hung up the phone on me. And I didn't know it at the time, but I was part of the problem. I was the private owners that they hated. And so I had to learn on my own how to take care of these animals. We kept copious notes, and I had all of my notes from how we had taken care of bobcats over the year for rehab and release. So I had a little bit of an idea of how these guys work. But the very first tiger that we brought home was named Shere Khan. And my husband did not have a license to fly because he could barely read or write. And so he never was able to get a pilot's license, but he flew all the time. And we flew out to Flat Rock, Indiana, because he had heard that this guy had some black leopards in his backyard, and he wanted to see them. And when we got there, we looked at these tiny little broken down cages. Some of them were being kept in a shed where it was just, I mean, it was so filthy. You can't even imagine.
Just
So,
cruel.
oh, horrible. And they had this one tiger there that I swear, if I had reached around this cat's head like this, I don't think I could have touched the back of his ears. It was the biggest tiger I had ever seen in my life. And it was just, you know, it took up almost the entire cage. And so we went into this guy's house, and it was, and this guy was in Tiger King. If you remember the guy with the really long white beard.
Oh, yeah.
Dennis Hill. He was actually the first person that ever threatened to kill me.
Oh, jeez.
But it wasn't from this day. And so he asked us to come into his house, and it was so disgusting. He's like, have a seat. I'm like, I'll just stand here.
Yeah. Thanks, but no thanks.
And I look over in the corner, and there's a cat carrier that's like rocking in the corner. And so I went over to look inside, and it was just wall to wall stuffed with this tiger cub that could not move. He was like laying in his own filth, and he had these huge sores on his belly from laying in his own urine. And the guy pulled him out, and he said, yeah, I sold him before he was born. I thought he was going to be white, and he turned out to be yellow, and nobody wants the yellow tigers. They're considered throwaway tigers in the industry. Yeah, because they can get, back then, they could get $50,000 or $60,000 for a white tiger, and the golden tigers, they would produce literally hundreds and hundreds of them that nobody wanted. And so my husband said, well, we'll take him. And so we tore out the back seat of our plane so that we could put the pet taxi in there and flew him back to Florida. So that was our first big cat experience.
Yeah. Excellent stuff. You mentioned that we'll call him a gentleman, was the first person to threaten to kill you. Do you want to tell us what happened there?
This was years later, and he was in trouble with the state of Indiana. They had come in and they had seen the horrible conditions there, and they told him that he had to get rid of, I think, like all but 2 of his cats. And so the animal protection groups typically all work together whenever the state does go in and seize these animals. And so when he found out that we were involved in, you know, reporting these horrible conditions to the authorities, and that we were trying to get the animals removed and trying to have his license taken away, he said that he knew a guy in Miami who could kill me because he had done it before. And I don't know for sure because he didn't say the name, but everybody in the big cat industry knows the guy in Miami to be Mario Tabro, who was also in Tiger King and was the guy who said that Scarface was modeled after him. And, you know, he had been sent to jail for over 100 years for his cocaine business. It was one of the biggest cocaine businesses in the world at the time, and for wildlife trafficking charges. And so he turned state's evidence and got out in 12 years and went right back into dealing in wildlife.
Jeez.
And still does today. So
what a pillar of the community.
Yeah.
Jeez, we get him, right? But all right, moving on from him, if we can talk a little bit about Tiger King. So obviously throughout the documentary, it highlighted your feud with Joe Exotic, right? So if you don't mind,
let me correct you there.
Go on, yeah, please do.
Was a feud, right? I've never even spoken to Joe Exotic. How
really?
Not once. And it just blows my mind that they created this entire fabricated feud between the 2 of us. He says my name all the time, but I was never talking to him or about him other than talking about the issues about breeding and discarding cats and that kind of stuff.
So that's my next question, I guess, then, is somewhat irrelevant. I was about to ask, how did you first encounter Joe Exotic, and what were your first initial thoughts on him? So does that question still stand? Could we still answer that with that said, or? Yeah,
actually, I didn't know it until 2019. And in 2019, Robert Moore came out with a podcast called Over My Dead Body, Joe Exotic. And in it, he talked about how I had commented on a newspaper article from 2004 where Joe was breeding lion cubs, and one of them was born deformed because he was doing a lot of inbreeding and crossbreeding with lions and tigers. And the reporter contacted me, and he said, there's this place that says they're a sanctuary in Oklahoma, and they bred this lion cub and it's deformed. What do you think about that? And I said, sanctuaries don't breed cats. That was my whole comment. I mean, that was it.
Yeah.
And Weirdly, that just sent Joe completely off the deep end. And I never even saw or heard of him that I remembered until 2009.
Mm.
And it was in 2009 that one of the things that I've done for years, because people always reach out to me and say, what do you know about this place? What do you know about that place? Are they a good place? Are they a bad place? And so I created this website called 911animalabuse.com. And what these people do is they use a lot of different names when they go out in public so that their bad deeds don't follow them. And on this website, what I did was I consolidated it where I'd had like every one person who owned 10 companies,
Mm.
and I would list all of those companies so that if somebody were trying to do any kind of research, they could put all that information together. And I found 21 operations that all turned out to be Joe Exotic or
Wow.
Joe Google. Yeah. So I went to my husband. I was like, "You're never going to believe this. This guy's got 21 names. Usually they have like 3.
Yeah.
He had 21 names." And so I put this web page together. My husband actually took it from there and made it a much better web page than I do because he's in Harvard MBA with a law degree and a lot smarter than I am. And this whole feud, if there is one, is actually between my husband and Joe.
Yeah.
Because they've been the ones going to court with each other and having this battle. And my husband got the $1 million judgment against Joe and all of that. But my husband doesn't have any tragedy in his life that these bad guys could point to try and divert attention away from him. I mean, he won CEO of the Year award by our local Chamber of Commerce. I mean, he's that kind of guy.
Yeah, fantastic.
Anybody could say against him. So they make me the villain against Joe because I had the tragedy of losing my husband in 1997 and not knowing what happened to him. And so for years, in order to not talk about the real issues about why they're abusing these cats, as soon as they tell the press, did you know she killed her husband and fed him to tigers? Then they're off and running on some stupid wild goose chase until they find out it's just a lie. The thing with the Tiger King producers was they knew it was a lie. I gave them all of the evidence that proved so many of the things that these people were saying against me were lies. And they just chose not to show that part of it. They only showed the accusation.
Didn't make good viewing.
Yeah.
It wasn't the viewership that they would have wanted. There's an old saying, I think, Carole, controversy equals cash, and by them creating controversy, then obviously they're going to get more viewers. So people are going to talk about this and everything. You become a talking point, but somewhat wrongly so become a talking point. And that's often how they do it. It's not about the individuals. It's about the program, the television show at the end of the day. Would you agree with that?
I would. And, I can't prove this, but somebody who's in the industry, a filmmaker that knew these filmmakers was saying that they had sold that show to Netflix for, I forget if it was $14 million or $16 million. So I think they had millions of reasons to paint me the way that they did.
Yeah, literally 14 million reasons right there. Yeah, well, that's it. Greed comes down to at the end of the day. Don't it? Greed and money, the root of all evil. As I was going to ask as well, what's obviously sticking with the Tiger King theme for the time being, what's your take on the allegations of Joe Exotic hiring a hitman to attempt a hit on you? What's your thoughts on that?
The first time that anybody came to me, I mean, for years before this, Joe would be on his little YouTube channel threatening me and saying that he would, I would stop breathing if I didn't stop chasing him through bankruptcy court and things like that. But those were just verbal threats. It wasn't until I reported those to the authorities, but they told me the same thing.
Yeah, of course.
Threatening you on TV or on YouTube. And so in 2015, a woman called me and said that Joe had tried to hire her husband because he was a sharpshooter in the military to kill me. And she felt like I should know about it. And so I turned that into the police and the FBI. They did nothing about it. Later in 2015, another woman contacted me and said Joe had just offered to pay her to kill me. And she felt like, her family was from law enforcement and that this was a really bad thing and that I should know about it. So I turned it over to the authorities and to the FBI, and they did nothing about it. And then, as you guys saw in Tiger King, he then tried to hire his handyman to kill me. And when somebody else found out that he was doing that, they didn't contact the FBI. The FBI actually contacted them about a whole different thing. they were in trouble for selling a lemur or doing some illegal thing with a lemur. And in order to not get in trouble with that, they were like, let me tell you about what's going on over here. And so it's the same kind of diversionary tactics. But what the FBI and the US Fish and Wildlife Service wanted to do was they didn't want a hitman in the wind. So they tried to get their own undercover agent to be hired. And so Joe hired that guy. And,
okay.
yeah. And so in Tiger King, they really downplay that. But if you get the transcripts, which I have from the trial, it's very, very clear. I mean, Joe tells the undercover FBI agent, just go into a parking lot, cap her in the head, and leave her body there.
Bloody hell.
What more do you need when he's telling this to the FBI?
Yeah,
but
well,
out Tiger King.
Yeah, that speaks, well, funny that, eh? Yeah, that speaks volumes, that, you know. So how did you feel when you first got wind of this? You know, obviously it's, you know, it's a serious threat.
My husband took the threats more serious after the FBI contacted him in I think it was in 2017 that they told us that this whole thing was happening. And I think it's funny that my husband thinks that was the moment, that was a defining moment, because these people have been threatening me for years.
Yeah.
And there's a guy here locally, his name's Vernon Yates. He has physically attacked me twice in public. And he's done that because we both live in Florida. We both are governed by the Florida Wildlife Commission. And whenever they're looking at doing anything to strengthen their rules, I'm there in support of stronger rules. He's there in opposition to them.
Ah, right, okay.
And, you know, they just don't want me to be heard. They want me to be silenced in any way that they can. And so they use these bully tactics. They try threatening and intimidation. I've had my mailbox full of snakes. I've had my mailbox full of spiders. I've gotten cornstarch in the mail that, you know, back that was supposed to be anthrax during the day when it was the thing. I've had to have the bomb squad come and disassemble my mailbox because they had hooked up wires around the flags. I don't know if you guys have flags there, but we put like the flag up and it makes a little mechanism that was supposed to blow up my mailbox. And all of that has been happening for decades. And I'm accustomed to dealing with these people. And all of the other people that are sanctuary operators like me are working in the animal protection industry. They'll come up to me and say, you know, we're so glad that you're out there doing this because we sure wouldn't want these people coming after us. And for God's sake, if we would all just band together, we'd have each other's backs on this, these bullies would have no way of doing the harmful things that they do to these animals or to people. But their tactics work most of the time. And so that's why they keep doing it.
Yeah, that's it. I got no time for bullies. Strength in numbers, they say. You know, if everyone can pile together and sing off the same hymn sheet, then they've got nowhere to play then, have they? You know?
Yeah.
In June 2020, were you not awarded by a federal judge, Joe Exotic's former property, to yourself? Was that right?
Yeah, back in, I think it was like 2012, we got $1 million judgment against Joe Scheibvogel. He was using the name Big Cat Rescue Entertainment. Our name's Big Cat Rescue.
Yeah.
And using the logo from our shirts and the banner from our website. And he took out a number that was local, phone number that was local to our area code and a Florida address, all of that. And then he went on Facebook and said that he had done all of that just to confuse people and make them think that when this cub petting thing was at the mall, that it was us, so that when we spoke out against it, we would harm our own reputation. And so he was clearly trying to deceive the public, and that's why we got $1 million judgment against him. And so we've been able to recover probably about $60,000 worth of his inheritance from some land in Kansas. We were awarded the GW Zoo, and then we just sold that.
Yeah.
I forget, we sold it for either 140,000 or 160,000.
Ah, good.
Yeah, so he still owes us a ton of money, but I understand he's writing a book and selling NFTs and doing all kinds of stuff from prison to make money. So maybe we'll be able to gather the rest of it.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed, touch wood, and all that. We'll sit tight and wait for that then. But yes.
I'm not holding my breath.
Let's not hold our breath. We'll all suffocate. But live in some sort of hope there. So obviously it was a lockdown classic, shall we say, a cult lockdown classic was Tiger King. I'd say, Carole, you were probably my lady of lockdown even, This, out of nowhere, there you are, my queen, Carole Baskin. It was a very controversial show, obviously, for obvious reasons. As we've spoke about already, a lot of it is they've put in what they want people to see, not actually what the truth is. Why let the truth get in the way of a good program, right? What was your overall take on the program, on the show? Was it, did you take any positives away from it? Or was it like, oh my God, what have they done?
We worked with them for 5 years. And they said the name of this show was going to be called Stolen Wildlife. And when they asked me questions about Joe Schreibvogel, they said, he's only going to be like a very small portion of this thing. It's really going to be about these animals being abused and exploited and how this is causing the extinction of the tiger in the wild. So we were all about doing that. We were happy to have them come to our sanctuary anytime they wanted to film. We had them over to our house. We had them over to my mother's house. We felt like these were people that were helping us in this battle to protect big cats. So when we saw the trailers that came out for the Netflix show called Tiger King, we contacted them. We're like, who's working on that show? Because everybody in Hollywood knows everybody else and what they're working on.
Yeah.
And we thought, surely it's just like some nobody that is put together something about Joe. And all of a sudden they didn't want to talk about it. And so my husband and I sat there and we binge watched it just like everybody else in America. Yeah. And I mentioned at the very beginning of this that there had been a podcast the August before this. And so in the podcast, Robert Moore had done kind of the same thing where he takes the listener through this journey that he had gone through, because he had met Joe, he was enamored with him, he thought that he was actually singing those songs and that he was talented. He didn't know that none of that was true. Joe didn't write them, he didn't sing them, he didn't play the guitar. Which was what Tiger King really focused on a lot, was to make people love this folk hero. And it's like, it's not a country and western singer. But anyway, Robert Moore said he had really fallen into this whole cult of Joe Exotic kind of thing. And then he discovered that the things that Joe was saying about me just weren't true. Once he came and talked to me and he looked at the court records and he looked at the public records, like the real estate business, that I was the person who built this real estate business from the beginning. And I didn't marry a millionaire. I made us millionaires.
Yeah.
I treated Don's daughters better than Don ever treated his daughters. And so at the end of it, he comes out and he says, but here's what I learned at the end. And he dispels this whole myth that Joe had created. And so when we watched Tiger King, we thought, well, they're probably doing the same thing. They're just trying to, lead the public along, make them think that I'm this evil person. And then in the last episode, they'll come clean and say, but here's what we learned to be true. They never did it. And then they had that like final episode that really wasn't an episode. It was just some guy talking.
That was bizarre. Yeah.
But I thought, well, maybe this is where they're going to finally come clean. Nope. Didn't do it then either. Jeez. So I hear there's going to be a season 2. Maybe they'll come clean in season 2. I don't know. But when they reached out to me and said, hey, we want to clear the air, I said, lose my number.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. They approached you for season 2. Is that right?
Well, they approached me. I'm thinking it was like April of this year. So I assume it was because of Tiger King 2, because what I had heard from some other people that were in the show is they had gone back to them and had secured tighter release forms.
Yeah.
And the release forms they were having all these people sign said that they couldn't talk to anybody but them. And I think that was such a dirty thing to do to those people, because you saw the people that were in Tiger King, they were not so smart. They wouldn't know how to read a contract and see.
No.
Prohibited them from ever speaking to anybody about this issue, to anybody but them. And so they, by doing that, they give the producers of Tiger King the opportunity to control the narrative forever. And I wasn't going to let them do that to me.
Definitely not. No, that's it. So you gave them a wide berth when they approached you for a second time, yeah?
Yeah. Rightly
so, I think. Yeah. Okay. So obviously we touched a little earlier on. Don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, okay? But touched a little earlier on about the show and the aftermath of the show, pointing fingers, allegations of your former husband, Don, the disappearance. I was just going to ask, just to put things to bed for anyone who might have any doubt, who might be watching or listening. Would you want to comment on that at this time?
My husband was suffering from something, and I didn't know what it was. I thought that he had Alzheimer's, but I didn't know for sure.
Okay.
And so what I was doing was I had taken him to the doctor, I had taken him to a psychiatrist. I didn't know until after he disappeared that he had been diagnosed by one of them as being bipolar. He hid that from me.
Right.
And so
Okay.
he wasn't getting medicated for it. And then the appointment that I had with the Alzheimer's specialist was set for late August, and he disappeared August the 18th before he ever got to see that person. But I was doing everything I possibly could to protect him and to get him the medical and mental help that he needed. Meanwhile, it seemed to me that everybody else in his life was taking advantage of him, ripping him off, robbing him blind because of the fact that he just couldn't remember from one minute to the next what he had said or what he had done. And, to take something so tragic as that and to try and turn that against me and make me the villain, I can't even imagine how evil a person's heart has to be when they see all of that evidence and decide not to present any of it.
No, well, thank you for making comment on it. You didn't have to, like I said, but appreciate it. Moving on to a happier note. On a happier note, you appeared on Dancing with the Stars season 29. Did a little jig to the Eye of the Tiger track. How did you get into this? How were you approached for this? How was the competition experience for you? And how did you do? Because I must confess, I've not seen it myself yet, but I'll do a little digging and I'll dig it up.
Well, I proved to everyone that I cannot dance.
That's what it's all about, though, isn't it?
But in fairness, I had told them from the beginning, dancing was a sin in my family. So I had never danced a step.
Yeah.
And I don't have any natural rhythm or ability. And I'm old, for crying out loud. I had just turned 60. I was the oldest person in the show. But the way that it came about was, as you can imagine, after Tiger King, I just got inundated by media requests.
Oh, yeah.
And I turned them all down because it was like I felt so betrayed by the producers of Tiger King. I couldn't believe what they had done, that I didn't want to talk to anybody for about.
I suppose it's hard to trust people then, Carole, as well, after going through that.
Yeah. I'm just baffled and blown away by it. Two of the people that were on the list, one was Jimmy Fallon and the other one was Dancing with the Stars. And my daughter was looking at the list, and she's been doing this with me since she was 12 years old. She turned 40 last year. She's about to turn 41 this month.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I love Jimmy Fallon, so you just got to do that show. And I love Dancing with the Stars, which I had never seen. And so the Jimmy Fallon thing turned out to be a prank. It was a really clever prank where they had used little clips of Jimmy Fallon speaking. So I thought through this interface on Zoom that I was talking to him, but I wasn't. And they gave me half hour, 45 minutes to talk about the really important issues of the tiger being nearly extinct in the wild and what we need to do to protect it. And it got like 7 million views.
Jeez.
So I was happy with it, even though it was a prank.
Yeah. A positive prank.
Yeah. And then I looked at the Dancing with the Stars contact information, and the woman's name was Deanna Katz. And I thought, what are the chances? I mean,
it's a sign.
I thought so for sure. But she convinced me that she really was the producer and that it really was a legit thing. And we negotiated that. We negotiated a lot of COVID protocols because I wanted to be really safe for my family, for the cat's sake. But the other thing was that I could talk about the things that were left out of Tiger King. In fact, when my husband and I binge watched it, at the end of it, we just looked at each other and we said, well, that was a missed opportunity because it left out the tigers. They're the ones that are really suffering in all of this.
Yeah.
And so I thought that Dancing with the Stars would give me the opportunity to talk about tigers and protecting them when they said they would do that. And they did.
That's good. Yeah. They honored that. Yeah.
They did it on the show. And then they lined up, like every time I wasn't dancing, I was doing press. And so they would send me like all of these radio people and all of these TV people and all of these print people and magazine people. And they'd have them 10 at a time that I could talk to about the issues of saving the cats in the wild. And even though I only lasted for 3 shows, they're still sending me press and still letting me get the message out there because that the media keeps asking, what about Carole Baskin? And they're like, well, you can contact her and she'll talk to you. So that's been great.
Brilliant. Who else was on the show with you then at that time?
Anne Hake
Yeah.
was an actress, and she actually had me on her podcast with her partner. I think it's called Better Together.
Yeah.
Neve Schulman does a show called Catfish. I never watched TV, so I didn't know who any of these people were. Oakley, some basketball player by the name of Oakley, I think. And there was a football player by the name of Vernon Davis. He was really nice.
Yeah.
Nellie was probably nicer to me
Oh,
than
Nelly was on as well, yeah?
yeah.
Could he dance? Could he dance?
Yeah, he could dance. In fact, he had my vote from the very beginning.
There we are.
Said, who do you think's going to win? And I said from the beginning it was going to be Nellie.
Yeah, excellent. Brilliant. So that was a positive experience, that show for you, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Excellent stuff. Brilliant.
Terribly embarrassing, and I never worked so hard or bled so much in my life, but it was positive.
Brilliant. Well, that's what it's all about, you know, taking positives from negatives. All right, I can't dance, but I'm having a good time doing it, right? Excellent stuff. So what's next for Carole Baskin then? What's on the agenda?
This is what really lights my fire. And I think, you know, people have figured out in the last couple of decades that we shouldn't be turning cats into fur coats, and that we shouldn't have cats performing in circus acts. And they're about to understand that we shouldn't have them as pets. I mean, most of the world already gets that. America's just way behind everybody else on that one. But I think they're almost there, as far as, especially since there have been tigers running loose in Houston recently.
Yeah, that's not a good thing. That's not healthy, surely. Not for anyone.
It's helpful for our bill, though, so those cats. But the one big holdout that I see are zoos, because people were raised believing that zoos are good and that they're doing conservation work, and that having these animals teaches us to care about them in the wild, and that will cause us to save them from extinction. 200 years of zoos, and all we've done is push every single cat species to the brink of extinction. So that didn't work. We need something better. And what I see as being the alternative for zoos, I see them absolutely remaking themselves by adopting virtual reality. And the way that I see them doing this, are you a gamer? Do you wear a headset?
I know a few gamers. I know how it works. I'm a bit out of that loop. I'm a generation up, shall we say? So
yeah, me too.
I've got nephews and what have you, you know, and they're all over it.
So I'm all over it.
Excellent, Carole. Excellent.
I'm only all over it for the cats. I couldn't care less about playing games. And so what we do here at the sanctuary is every week we have like over 1.3 million subscribers on YouTube and something like 600 million views of our videos.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And so every week we put out a new video. But about 3 years ago, we started putting out 2 new videos. And one is a regular video like people are seeing right now.
Yeah.
And the other is a virtual reality one. So when you put that headset on, you are in the cage with the cat, because the camera can go in the cage, but not us people. And you feel like you are right there in that cat's world. And people are always, when I see them in the headset, they're like trying to pet the cat.
Yeah.
It's like right there in front of their face. Or they're jumping back because the cat is like chewing bones and snarling and blowing, spraying all over them. And that kind of an experience is so immersive and makes you feel like you're really there. And so what I want to see are, imagine this, you put on the headset and you see this grid in front of you of like all these different cameras that you could choose from. And they have heat maps on them. So maybe nothing's happening on all of these cameras, but over here you see that there's a lot of activity. So you take your joystick and you pop over to camera 47. And there's a tiger in the wild, laying alongside a pool, maybe having a bath, and you are right there next to that cat because that camera is streaming 360. You can see everything in that cat's world, and it's streaming 24/7. So you're seeing that cat at night when through night vision, and some of these night cameras are amazing. I watch ours all the time, and it's like black and white during the day. It's what it looks like. And so you're seeing them when they're most active, And you're seeing them hunt, you're seeing them raise their young, you're seeing them mate, you're seeing all of the real activities of who these cats are in the wild. Now imagine with today's technology and cryptocurrency that the way that you have these cameras, the way you afford them is, say a zoo buys a subscription to each camera. And there's cameras in India and Brazil and Colorado, everywhere that these cats are living free, there's these cameras placed all over the place. A person like me can't afford to have a subscription every single camera, but a zoo could. And so you pay your $10, you go to the zoo, you put on the headset, and you can go anywhere in the world. You pick on the map where you want to go today, and you see those cats living in the wild the way they should be. And imagine the other things they could do, like if it's in the desert, they're blowing all this heat on you and you're feeling what it's like to be in the desert. Or if it's in India, you're smelling curry cooking in the background and you're feeling the mist, from the rainforest on you and all of that, so that you are right there with those cats. And then consider that those subscriptions that the zoos are paying for, or an individual might pay for a certain select number of cameras, all of that money, or at least the lion's share of it, go back to those communities who live with those cats. And their goal is to keep lots of healthy cats in front of the cameras. So they have to make sure there's clean air and clean water and plenty of prey, and that those ecosystems are working. When they do that, then the entire planet has lungs. We have the ability to actually survive together, and it gives everybody a reason to protect these wild spaces and these magnificent wild animals. So I see that as the future for zoos. And I think any zoo who doesn't do that is going to be disrupted by location-based arcades that are already doing this.
That sounds fantastic. Well, I'm sold. It gives you an opportunity as an individual to be literally a part of that cat's world without causing disruption as well. You're right there in the thick of it, but on the same hand, you're not doing any damage. So I think that sounds fantastic. And
there's so much being done with haptics right now. They make gloves where you can put the gloves on and you can feel that cat's fur. Everybody wants to touch a tiger. There's no good way to do that in real world, but in virtual world, you could touch that cat. You could feel the muscle. You could really experience everything you want to experience without harming a single animal. And it's cheaper for the zoos. It costs us about $10,000 per tiger per year just for food and vet care. So imagine spending that money on a virtual tiger that could live forever one time. How much more money than you could put into protecting these wild spaces?
Exactly. That's amazing. That's incredible. Has that started happening yet? Is this in the idea process at the moment, or is it actually happening at the moment?
It's one of the reasons that I go on so many of these podcasts like this one with you, because I want somebody to take this and run with it. My whole goal right now is to get the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed, which will ban cub petting and phase out private ownership of big cats in America. That's the first step to saving the tiger. I'm not a techie. I don't know how to code. I need somebody to and I don't want to make any money off of this. I don't care who with it. I just want somebody to do it so that we are protecting wildlife in the wild where they belong. And so I'm talking to anybody and everybody, hoping somebody will. I did have an interesting conversation with Iconic Engine, and I forget why they contacted me, but they asked for 30 minutes on my calendar, and they said, what do you need in order to make this thing happen? And I said, well, the first thing is there aren't any 360 internet streaming cameras yet. There's flat file internet streaming cameras, like you can see in one direction, but then you don't know why that cat was running by. Was it chasing food? Was it being chased?
Yeah. Where did it go? Where did it come from? Yeah.
Yeah. And they said, oh, those cameras exist. And I said, I've never been able to find them. And they said, well, we have them. They're just ridiculously expensive. Well, ridiculously expensive today is affordable 5 years from now. So I think if there's enough demand for this kind of thing, that people will build the cameras necessary. They'll build the infrastructure necessary to make this happen.
I think it sounds like a fantastic idea. I genuinely do. I think it's great for the people. I think it's great for the animals. It's just win-win. So good luck with it. Hopefully someone watching or listening, if you are, get in touch. We'll chuck a load of links in the bottom of the description here as well. That'd be fantastic. Brilliant stuff. Excellent. I genuinely wish you all the best with that.
Thank you.
Before we wrap up, I wonder if you mind doing me a favor. I've got two people at home who are massive fans. They go by the name of Amy and Maya. Would you mind giving them a little shout for me?
Sure. Hey, Amy and Maya. Are they there right now, or am I doing this?
They're not here right now, though. They're in the house. They are. So.
Hey, Amy and Maya. I am so happy to be part of your family today. Oh my goodness. It's so great to be here with your Caiman Griffiths.
Fantastic. They're going to love it. They're going to love it. That's awesome. Before we wrap up, Carole, I know you're a busy lady. I know you've got other things on. Do you have any other plugs, shout outs, acknowledgements, or anything that you want to chuck in your for our viewers and listeners before we let you enjoy the rest of your day?
I think the biggest thing anybody can do right now is, if you know people who are US citizens, ask them to go to bigcatact.com and contact their member of Congress and ask them to support the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And if you don't live in the US, the best thing you can do for big cats is, anytime you see pictures on social media of people touching big cats, call them out on it. There's never a good reason to be doing that. It's just showboating, showing off, and that's what causes other people to want to pay to pet these cubs. And that's what causes hundreds of them to be bred, used for about 12 to 16 weeks, and then thrown away when they're no longer profitable.
Brilliant. Well, you heard it, you guys. Take note, listen, pay attention, and call people out, for crying out loud. Carole, you're doing awesome work. Thank you so much for coming on and having a chat with me. I really do appreciate it. I'm going to leave you get on with your day. I hope you have a marvelous day. Ladies and gentlemen, Carole effing Baskin. Thank you so much, Carole. We'll chat again sometime. Look after yourself. All the best. Woohoo!